Every officer standing in Hangar 3 already knew the mission was a death sentence. The silence made that obvious. No one exchanged jokes. No one wished each other luck. They simply watched the final shuttle descend through the magnetic shield and settle onto the deck of the Coalition warship. Resolute. An enormous vessel whose scarred hull bore the marks of too many losing battles. Among Coalition sailors, the ship had another name, the Coffin. It was where failed captains finished their careers, disgraced officers sought redemption, and impossible missions quietly disappeared into official records. When the shuttle door opened, the passengers filed out one by one. Engineers, supply officers, replacement Marines. Then the last passenger stepped onto the deck, the human. He carried a single weathered duffel over one shoulder. His dark naval coat looked decades older than anything around him, its faded insignia stitched by careful hands rather than printed by modern machines. Beneath the coat rested practical combat gear instead of ceremonial clothing. He paused for only a heartbeat, studying the cavernous hangar with steady steel blue eyes before continuing forward. The whispers began immediately. "That's him? I expected someone taller. I expected someone armed. I expected someone already dead." None of the comments changed his expression. He simply walked. Commander Varessa Sol watched from the upper observation platform, arms folded behind her back. The blue glow tracing the silver markings along her neck shimmered beneath the hangar lights, while her long white braid rested neatly against the back of her uniform. Her violet eyes never left the newcomer. So that's humanity. The aging captain beside her gave a slow nod. The last confirmed survivor. He looks... She searched for the right word. Ordinary. So did gravity before someone fell. Varessa glanced toward the captain. "You've already decided you like him." "I've decided nothing." The captain smiled faintly. "I've simply learned that quiet people deserve closer attention." Below, the human stopped before the welcoming detail. An administrative officer activated a datapad. "State your name." "Elias Arden." "Former rank." "Lieutenant Commander." "Former? My Navy no longer exists." The officer hesitated. An awkward silence spread through the group. Elias spared him the discomfort. "Next question." Several nearby crew members exchanged surprised looks. Not because of the answer, because of the calm with which he had spoken it. No bitterness, no self-pity, just fact. The administrative officer cleared his throat. "You've been assigned as tactical advisor pending evaluation." "I understand." "You'll answer to Commander Sol." "I understand." "You'll remain under observation." "I expected as much." The officer frowned. "You expected it? You expected it?" "I'm an outsider walking onto a ship full of strangers during wartime." Elias offered the faintest smile. "Observation seems responsible." A few chuckles escaped nearby technicians. The tension eased slightly. Varessa noticed. Interesting. He had changed the atmosphere without trying. She descended the platform staircase with measured confidence, boots striking the metal deck in crisp rhythm. The gathered crew instinctively stepped aside. She stopped directly in front of Elias. She stood nearly as tall as he did. Up close she noticed details impossible to see from above. Tiny scars crossed his knuckles. Another rested beneath one eye. None appeared cosmetic. They belonged to someone accustomed to solving problems personally. "You've drawn attention already," she said. "I walked through the front door. You answered questions like someone giving orders." "I answered honestly." Her eyes narrowed. "You'll find honesty isn't always appreciated aboard this ship. I've served long enough to know that." Neither looked away. The silence stretched. Crew members quietly pretended to inspect cargo while listening carefully. Varessa finally gestured toward the main corridor. "Come." He fell into step beside her. Neither spoke until the hangar disappeared behind reinforced blast doors. You know our reputation? I read the mission file. And? You've survived 17 deployments everyone expected you to lose. We've lost 3 captains. I noticed. You still accepted the transfer? I wasn't asked. That answer made her glance sideways. You resent it? No. No? I've learned resenting reality changes very little. Varessa found herself studying him again. His posture remained relaxed. Not careless. Balanced. Every movement economical. Like someone conserving energy because experience had taught him when it mattered. They entered the command deck. Conversation immediately stopped. Officers openly stared. The chief engineer, a broad reptilian whose scaled arms looked capable of bending steel, snorted loudly. That's the famous human? Several officers laughed. The engineer crossed both massive arms. He doesn't look capable of lifting my toolbox. Elias looked toward him. I'd rather repair what's inside it. Laughter instantly shifted direction. Even the communications officer struggled to hide a grin. The engineer blinked. Varessa almost smiled. Almost. Instead, she pointed toward an empty tactical station. Your workspace. Elias set down his duffel. The display flickered. He frowned slightly. Permission to ask a question? Granted. When was your sensor software last updated? The bridge exchanged puzzled glances. The engineer answered. 6 months ago. It isn't functioning correctly. The engineer barked another laugh. You've been aboard 12 seconds. 14. You haven't even touched it. I don't need to. The engineer stepped closer. Explain. Elias pointed toward the tactical display. Your long-range scans refresh every 3.2 seconds. So? Your passive array updates every 2.8. Yes. They're drifting apart. The engineer frowned. No, they... He stopped. His eyes shifted toward the screen. Then another. His claws moved rapidly across nearby controls. One display expanded, another rotated. Silence spread across the bridge. He's light? Nobody spoke. The engineer continued typing. The synchronization clock slipped nearly half a second. He stared at Elias. How did you notice? The display blinked. That's impossible. It blinked. The engineer looked genuinely unsettled. I've missed that for months. Elias shrugged gently. It happens. No. The engineer slowly shook his head. It shouldn't. Varessa watched every face on the bridge. Mockery had disappeared. Curiosity had replaced it. Interesting. Very interesting. The captain entered moments later. Status report, the engineer answered before anyone else. Our new advisor identified a sensor fault. The captain looked toward Elias. You repaired it? I noticed it. The engineer grumbled. I repaired it. A quiet smile touched the captain's lips. Excellent. He turned toward the crew. We depart in 1 hour. The bridge resumed activity. Navigation routes appeared. Weapons diagnostics filled multiple displays. Mission briefings streamed across the central projector. Elias read each one silently. Convoy interception. Enemy numerical superiority. Less than 34% projected survival. He closed the file. Varessa noticed. No questions? I have several. You aren't asking them. You aren't asking them. They'll be answered once we begin moving. You sound confident. I sound patient. For the first time since his arrival, something resembling amusement reached her eyes. Only briefly. You're unusual. I've heard that before. I haven't decided whether that's good. You don't have to. She studied him another moment before returning to her command station. The bridge lights dimmed as the Resolute disengaged from the station. Massive engines awakened beneath the deck. The familiar vibration rolled through the hull. Outside the forward viewport, Stars slowly stretched into brilliant lines. The Coffin was leaving harbor once again. Most aboard believed they were sailing toward their final battle. Only one man quietly opened a battered notebook, sharpened an old graphite pencil, and began sketching the ship's tactical layout from memory. He had been aboard less than an hour. Already, he was searching for ways to keep every soul on the Resolute alive. Morning aboard the Resolute arrived without sunlight. The ship measured time through muted chimes that rolled softly through every compartment, signaling the beginning of another duty cycle. Crew members emerged from cramped quarters with the practiced rhythm of people who had repeated the same routine for years. Elias had already been awake for nearly 2 hours. The galley steward paused while wiping a counter. "You've been here all night?" Elias accepted a mug of bitter Coalition coffee. "Couldn't sleep. Nervous?" "I like learning new ships before they surprise me." The steward chuckled. "You'll fit in better than you think." Elias smiled politely before returning to the table overlooking the engineering reports spread across his notebook. He hadn't copied them. He had redrawn them. Handwritten diagrams covered the yellowed pages with arrows, measurements, and observations. When the chief engineer entered the galley, his heavy boots echoed against the deck. He spotted Elias immediately. "You!" Elias looked up. "Good morning." The reptilian engineer folded thick arms across his chest. "You embarrassed me yesterday." "I wasn't trying to." "That almost makes it worse." Elias closed the notebook. "You repaired the system. You still found it." "I happened to notice something." "You keep saying happened." The engineer leaned forward. "People don't happen to notice synchronization drift from across a bridge." Elias shrugged. "My instructors would have yelled at me if I missed it." The engineer stared for several seconds. Finally, he snorted. "I almost hope you're lying." Commander Varessa began her inspection rounds precisely on schedule. Precision had shaped every year of her military career. Every corridor, every weapons locker, every duty station. Routine exposed weakness before enemies could. She reached Hangar 2 expecting another ordinary inspection. Instead, she found controlled chaos. Cargo containers had been rearranged. Maintenance crews moved with unusual efficiency. Equipment no longer blocked emergency routes. The deck looked organized. She stopped beside the logistics officer. "Who authorized this?" "No one." "What?" The officer pointed across the hangar. "The human." Varessa followed his gesture. Elias stood beside 3 mechanics, sleeves rolled to his forearms, helping reposition a damaged loading platform. He wasn't giving orders. He was asking questions. "What slows you down the most?" One mechanic answered. "We waste time crossing the bay for tools." Elias nodded. "So move the tools." "We requested that months ago." "What happened?" "Nothing." Elias looked around. "Then we'll do it ourselves." The mechanics exchanged uncertain glances. "Without authorization?" He smiled. "If someone objects after seeing better results, we'll move everything back." One mechanic laughed. Another joined in. Within minutes, they resumed working with obvious enthusiasm. Varessa watched from the doorway. "Interesting. No speeches, no dramatic leadership, just practical solutions." One of the mechanics noticed her. The laughter vanished. Everyone straightened instantly. Elias turned. "Commander, you reorganized my hangar. I helped your crew reorganize it. I didn't approve this." "No. You should have requested permission. I considered it." "And? You would have needed meetings." She raised an eyebrow. "You've known me less than a day. I've known organizations much longer." Several nearby mechanics suddenly became fascinated by the floor. Varessa crossed the remaining distance until only a step separated them. "You enjoy challenging authority." "No." "Then explain yourself." Elias met her eyes calmly. I enjoy removing obstacles. You believe I'm an obstacle? I believe unnecessary delays are. The silence stretched. The mechanics expected an explosion. Instead, Varessa slowly surveyed the reorganized hangar. Emergency routes were now completely clear. Heavy equipment sat closer to repair stations. Supply racks followed logical sequences. Workers moved noticeably faster. She disliked admitting it. The arrangement was better. Carry on. The mechanics blinked. Elias gave a small nod. Thank you. As she walked away, she heard one mechanic whisper, I thought we were dead. Another answered, So did I. The tactical briefing began an hour later. Senior officers gathered around the holographic display dominating the center of the bridge. Captain Halden activated the projection. Our convoy enters the Naris corridor tomorrow. Red indicators appeared throughout the star map. Dominion forces have intercepted similar routes 4 times this month. The Marine commander tapped one glowing symbol. They'll attack here. The intelligence officer disagreed. They'll wait until here. Arguments began immediately. Different officers defended different predictions. Voices gradually rose. Elias remained silent. Varessa noticed. You've said nothing. I was listening. Your opinion? Every officer turned toward him. He studied the map another moment. They won't attack either location. The room became quiet. The Marine commander frowned. Why not? Elias pointed toward a seemingly empty section of space. Here. One officer frowned. There's nothing there. Exactly. The captain folded his hands. Explain. The convoy expects attacks near choke points. Elias traced several possible routes. So do you. He looked around the room. If everyone predicts the same battlefield, why would the enemy choose it? The intelligence officer tilted her head. They'd lose surprise. Correct. The captain considered the projection. You think they'll bypass tactical advantages? I think they'll trade terrain for uncertainty. The Marine commander crossed massive arms. Risky. Elias nodded. It is. Would you? If I commanded them? Yes. I already am. Confused expressions spread across the bridge. Elias smiled faintly. I've been trying to understand how they think. The captain's eyes brightened. Instead of asking where the Dominion would attack, he had become the Dominion commander. Varessa felt something shift inside her. Not admiration. Not yet. Recognition. She had spent years studying tactics. Very few officers naturally changed perspective that way. Later that evening, the ship entered a scheduled weapons exercise. Energy cannons fired at autonomous drones moving through simulated combat formations. The results were disappointing. Hit rates hovered below 40%. The weapons chief cursed under his breath. Elias watched quietly from the observation platform. After several volleys, he spoke. Permission? The captain nodded. Elias approached the targeting station. I won't touch your controls. The operator looked relieved. I just need one adjustment. What adjustment? Delay your firing sequence. The operator frowned. By how much? 0.4 seconds. That's ridiculous. Try it once. The operator glanced toward Varessa. She gave a slight nod. The next drone formation appeared. Instead of firing immediately, the operator waited. 0.4 seconds, then released the volley. The drones exploded almost simultaneously. Hit rate, 78%. The bridge fell silent. The weapons chief stared at the results. Again. They repeated the exercise. 79%. Again. 81. Again. 80. The chief slowly turned toward Elias. What did you change? Nothing. You changed something. I changed timing. Why? Elias pointed toward the simulation. The drones expect immediate reactions. He folded his arms. So did the targeting software. Understanding slowly spread through the room. By refusing to fire at the earliest opportunity, the computers predicted movement more accurately. A simple adjustment. Massive improvement, the chief engineer muttered quietly. I hate that he keeps making things look easy. Night settled across the ship. Most of the crew slept. Varessa remained alone on the observation deck overlooking the endless stars. She heard footsteps behind her. You should be resting, she said. Elias stopped beside the railing. So should you. She looked sideways. Couldn't sleep? I've been thinking. About? This ship. What about it? He watched distant starlight drift across the viewport. Everyone aboard believes they're serving on a doomed vessel. Her expression hardened slightly. Statistics support that. They also believe survival depends entirely on luck. She remained silent. They've stopped expecting success. And you haven't? He looked toward the bridge below, where dozens of officers continued working despite exhaustion. I think they've forgotten how good they actually are. She studied his profile. You've known them one day. I've watched them. You think observation tells you everything? No, his answer came gently. But it tells me where to begin. For several moments neither spoke. The stars slid silently past the ship. Finally Varessa asked, Do humans always believe people can become better? Elias smiled softly. The good ones do. She looked away before he noticed the warmth rising across the silver markings along her neck. It had been years since anyone answered one of her questions without trying to impress her. For reasons she couldn't explain. She wanted to ask another. The Dominion attacked 11 hours earlier than Coalition intelligence predicted. No warning came from long-range patrols. No distress beacon reached the fleet. One moment the convoy drifted through the Nereus corridor beneath a calm field of distant stars. The next, space erupted into violent white flashes. Multiple contacts. The communications officer's voice cracked across the bridge. Enemy signatures emerging less than 4,000 kilometers. Shock rippled through the command deck. The tactical display flooded crimson. Captain Halden stood so quickly his chair slid backward. Battle stations! Throughout the Resolute. Alarms thundered. Heavy blast doors sealed. Deck lights shifted from white to deep crimson. Crew members sprinted through corridors as the battleship's engines surged with renewed power. Varessa's fingers danced across her console. 21 Dominion cruisers. Her eyes widened another fraction. 2 carriers. The Marine commander swore. They're cutting directly through the convoy. Captain Halden stared at the tactical map. They're nowhere near the predicted choke points. Several officers instinctively turned toward Elias. He had predicted this exact maneuver. Elias was already studying the display. His notebook lay open beside him. A graphite pencil rested lightly between his fingers. He wasn't writing. He was measuring. Captain Halden noticed. What do you see? They're ignoring the escorts. The captain frowned. They're after the transports. No. Elias circled several formations. They want us to believe that. Varessa looked closer. What are they actually targeting? Our command ships. The bridge grew quiet. The carriers aren't launching toward civilian transports. He tapped another formation. They're forcing our escorts away from the flag group. Captain Halden's expression darkened. They're trying to decapitate the fleet. Elias nodded once. Exactly. Outside, brilliant blue lances tore across the darkness. Coalition destroyers erupted into expanding clouds of molten debris. Missiles streaked between formations. Fighters poured from Dominion carriers like swarms of metallic insects. The convoy immediately began fragmenting. Panic spread across open communication channels. Escort 7 requesting support. Our engines are offline. Flagship taking direct fire. We've lost formation. The bridge became a wall of overlapping voices. Captain Halden clenched the edge of his command console. Navigation. No clear route. Weapons. Targets everywhere. Varessa looked toward Elias. What would you do? Every officer heard the question. The room fell almost silent. Elias answered without hesitation. Stop defending. Several heads snapped toward him. The Marine commander frowned. Have you lost your mind? If we keep reacting, we'll lose. Captain Halden stepped closer. What are you proposing? Elias pointed toward the largest Dominion carrier. We attack. The captain blinked. With one battleship? With one unpredictable battleship. The tactical officer shook his head. We'd be surrounded. We already are. No one argued. Because he was right. Varessa studied the projected battlefield. If we charge their center, she traced several possible outcomes. Our port side becomes exposed. Elias nodded. Only briefly. You've already calculated this. I've estimated it. She looked directly at him. You really think it'll work? He met her eyes. I think hesitation won't. Captain Halden inhaled slowly. Years of experience had taught him that perfect certainty never existed in war. Only decisions. He looked around the bridge. No objections? Several officers clearly had them. None spoke. Finally, the captain smiled. I've ignored conventional wisdom before. He turned toward navigation. Helm. Sir? Set attack course. Silence. The helmsman hesitated. Directly toward the Dominion carriers? Captain Halden looked at Elias, then back to the helm. You heard me. The Resolute accelerated. Instead of retreating with the convoy, instead of reinforcing damaged escorts, the aging battleship drove directly into the enemy formation. Dominion commanders noticed immediately. They're charging us? One alien strategist frowned. Why? No coalition vessel has attempted this in decades. The Dominion fleet commander leaned forward. Track that battleship. Inside the Resolute. Warning alarms screamed. Enemy fire hammered the forward shields. The deck trembled violently. Consoles showered sparks across the bridge. Forward barrier at 78%. Port batteries damaged. Enemy fighters approaching. Varessa kept issuing orders with flawless precision. Point defense online. Redirect auxiliary power. Maintain acceleration. She stole a glance toward Elias. He hadn't moved. He watched the battle unfold with unnerving calm. Then he quietly said, Now. Captain Halden didn't ask why. Helm. Execute maneuver. The Resolute suddenly rolled hard to starboard. Several Dominion targeting computers overshot entirely. Enemy plasma salvos streaked harmlessly into empty space. The bridge lurched. Crew members grabbed nearby consoles. Before the Dominion could correct, the human spoke again. Port thrusters. The battleship pivoted sharply. Its damaged side rotated away, while fresh armor absorbed incoming fire. Then, fire. Every forward cannon discharged simultaneously, not at the nearest cruiser, not at the carrier, at the empty space between them. The bridge stared. Several officers thought the human had finally made a mistake. Then the first Dominion cruiser exploded. Fragments spun directly into the carrier's fighter launch corridor. Hundreds of launching fighters collided with burning wreckage. Chain reactions rippled through the enemy formation. Secondary explosions illuminated space brighter than nearby stars. The communications officer gasped. They blocked their own launch bays. Elias nodded. They're too tightly grouped. Captain Halden laughed. Not politely. Not professionally. A genuine laugh. I've wanted to do that for 20 years. The Dominion formation faltered. Only briefly. But in battle, seconds mattered. Coalition escorts immediately exploited the confusion. Destroyers slipped through gaps that hadn't existed moments earlier. Transport ships escaped collapsing encirclements. Fighters regained initiative. Varessa watched the tactical display transform. Red symbols retreated. Blue formations stabilized. Hope spread across the battlefield. Another explosion rocked the Resolute. The lights flickered. Direct hit! The chief engineer shouted through internal communications. We've lost cooling on Reactor 3. Captain Halden looked toward engineering. Can you contain it? A pause. Eventually, Elias closed his notebook. I'll help. The engineer barked a laugh over the speakers. You? I've worked around naval reactors. You've worked around human reactors. They all become dangerous the same way. Without waiting for permission, Elias headed toward the lift. Varessa caught his arm. For the first time since he'd boarded. She touched him. The contact lasted only a heartbeat. Her fingers wrapped instinctively around his forearm. Warm. Solid. She released him immediately. Engineering is taking direct fire. I know. You could die. He offered a small smile. So could everyone else. Something inside her tightened. Not fear. Something more personal. She didn't like the feeling. Take a security team. I only need 1 engineer. You'll take 4 Marines. He hesitated. Very well. She nodded once. Good. Neither acknowledged the brief silence that followed. Engineering looked nothing like the orderly bridge. Smoke rolled beneath flashing emergency lights. Steam hissed from fractured coolant lines. Crew members hauled damaged equipment across vibrating deck plates. The reptilian chief engineer spotted Elias. You actually came. You sounded busy. I am. The engineer pointed toward an open maintenance shaft. Cooling regulators are locked. I'll crawl in. You won't fit. Elias glanced toward the narrow opening. I will. The engineer looked skeptical. 2 minutes later, Elias disappeared inside the cramped conduit. The passage barely allowed movement. Heat wrapped around him immediately. He reached the damaged regulator by touch more than sight. Manual override lever, he called. The engineer tossed a magnetic wrench through the opening. Elias caught it. Metal groaned. The override refused to move. He adjusted his grip. Pulled harder. Nothing. He planted both boots against the conduit wall. Muscles strained beneath soot-covered sleeves. The lever suddenly snapped free. Throughout engineering, warning sirens stopped. Coolant surged back into the reactor. Crew members cheered. The engineer stared into the access tunnel. I've been fighting that lever for 30 minutes. Elias crawled back out, face streaked with grease. It needed a different angle. The engineer shook his head. No. He extended one massive scaled hand. It needed you. Elias accepted the handshake. The engineer's grip was crushing. The human returned it without complaint. From that moment forward, the chief engineer never referred to him as the human again. He called him only one thing, Lieutenant. Hours later, the Dominion fleet finally withdrew. The convoy had survived. Against every projection, against every prediction, against every accepted tactical doctrine. As exhausted crew members slowly returned to normal duties, Commander Varessa remained standing alone before the forward viewport. Behind her, the bridge celebrated quietly. She barely heard them. She watched Elias instead. He sat at his station, calmly sharpening the same graphite pencil he'd carried aboard. No celebration, no pride, just preparation for whatever came next. She realized something that unsettled her more than the battle itself. She had stopped wondering whether he belonged aboard the Resolute. Now she couldn't imagine the ship without him. The battle left scars that no amount of polish could hide. The Resolute limped through silent space under reduced power, her hull blackened by plasma burns and fresh impact craters. Repair drones drifted along the outer armor, while engineering teams worked through every duty cycle without complaint. Victory had kept the convoy alive. It had not come cheaply. 3 crew members had died. 27 remained in the medical bay. Every officer carried exhaustion behind their eyes. Elias walked the length of the ship instead of remaining on the bridge. He stopped in engineering first. The reptilian chief engineer looked up from a dismantled coolant pump. "You came to inspect my work." "I came to see if you needed another pair of hands." The engineer snorted. "A tactical officer offering maintenance." "I'm only useful if the ship survives." Without another word, Elias picked up a toolkit. For the next hour, neither spoke much. They simply worked. The silence felt comfortable. Eventually, the engineer glanced sideways. "You know what the crew calls you now?" Elias tightened a coupling. "I've heard several things. Lucky human. I hope that's not permanent." "It isn't." The engineer grinned. "They're starting to call you Commander." Elias stopped turning the wrench. "I'm not. Titles don't always come from regulations." Commander Varessa reviewed casualty reports in her office. Each name weighed heavily. She refused to skim them. Every officer deserved more than a number. A soft chime sounded. "Enter." The door opened. Elias stepped inside carrying 2 metal cups. "I interrupted." "You did." He held 1 cup toward her. "I also brought coffee." She accepted it despite herself. "I've noticed humans solve many problems with beverages." "We solve some. And the rest? We usually start with coffee." A faint smile escaped before she could stop it. She took a careful sip. It was stronger than anything served in the officer's mess. She looked at him over the rim of the cup. "You made this?" "I did." "It's terrible." "I've been told that's authentic." She laughed. Not politely. Not quietly. A genuine laugh echoed through the office. The sound surprised both of them. Varessa set the cup down. "I don't remember the last time I laughed on this ship. You've had difficult assignments." "I chose them." "Why?" She hesitated. "My people believe honor is earned through service. And you believe that." "I did." The difference in her wording lingered between them. Elias leaned lightly against the wall. "What changed?" She looked toward the stars outside her viewport. "When I graduated from the academy, I thought command meant never making mistakes." Her fingers tightened slightly around the cup. "Then I buried good officers because of decisions I made." Silence settled. She expected reassurance. She expected empty sympathy. Instead, Elias asked, "Do you still remember their names?" "Every one." "Then they weren't forgotten." She slowly met his eyes. "No. They'd probably be angry if their commander stopped living because they couldn't." Her breathing caught for only a moment. No one had ever answered her guilt that way. Later that evening, internal sensors detected pressure loss across Deck 9. Warning lights flashed. "Hull breach," the bridge announced. "Repair teams responding." Varessa and Elias reached the damaged section together. The corridor had partially collapsed. Emergency bulkheads prevented complete decompression, but twisted support beams blocked the maintenance access leading toward the breach. The chief engineer cursed. "My drones can't reach it." "How long before the damage spreads?" 20 minutes. Elias studied the narrow maintenance tunnel. "I can fit." Varessa looked at the opening. "It barely fits your shoulders." "It fits." The engineer frowned. "It's unstable." Elias removed his jacket. "I know." Before anyone could argue further, he crawled into the dark passage. The tunnel narrowed quickly. Metal groaned around him. Fragments of insulation brushed against his sleeves. Only the beam from his handheld lamp pierced the darkness. Behind him, Varessa knelt beside the access hatch. "You still with us?" "I've been in tighter places." "I don't believe you." "You don't have to." She rolled her eyes despite herself. His voice remained calm, steady. almost reassuring. Several meters ahead, the breach became visible. A fractured support plate had twisted across the emergency seal, preventing it from locking. He reached for it. The plate refused to move. "Status?" Varessa called. "I'm negotiating. With metal? So far it's winning," the engineer shouted from behind her. "Tell it I'm bigger." A few nearby technicians laughed. Even during repairs, Elias somehow eased tension. He adjusted his position. One boot found purchase against the tunnel wall. He pushed. The damaged plate shifted. Another hard shove. The emergency seal finally slammed into place. Warning alarms ceased. Pressure stabilized throughout the deck. Cheers erupted behind the hatch. Elias started crawling backward. Halfway through, the tunnel shuddered. A loud crack echoed overhead. "Move!" Varessa shouted. The ceiling collapsed. Dust exploded through the confined space. The access opening disappeared beneath twisted metal. "Elias." No answer. Her heartbeat accelerated. Without thinking, she grabbed a cutting torch. The engineer reached for her arm. "Commander, I'm going in. That's suicide." She ignited the torch anyway. Before she could cut through the obstruction, a gloved hand emerged from the debris, then another. Covered in dust, Elias pulled himself free and dropped onto the deck with a heavy breath. The corridor fell silent. Varessa knelt immediately. "Are you hurt?" "I'm dirty." "Elias." "My shoulder." He rotated it carefully. "It'll bruise." She looked over him with practiced eyes. A shallow cut crossed his forehead. His sleeve had torn open. Blood marked the fabric. Without thinking, she brushed dust from his shoulder. Their eyes met. Neither moved. The bustling corridor seemed to fade around them. She became aware of how close she was. Close enough to see tiny flecks of silver hidden inside his blue eyes. Close enough to notice the faint scent of machine oil clinging to his uniform. Close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him despite the cold corridor. Realizing herself, she withdrew her hand. "You should visit medical." "I've had worse." "I wasn't asking." His smile returned. "I noticed." Medical was unusually quiet. The amphibious physician cleaned the cut above Elias's eyebrow. "You humans collect scars like decorations. They tell stories. They also complicate my paperwork." The physician finished applying a regenerative patch. "There." Elias stood. "Thank you." As he stepped into the corridor, he found Varessa waiting outside. "You stayed. I wanted to confirm you listened." "I did." She studied the small bandage above his eye. "It suits you." He laughed softly. "I don't know whether that's a compliment. It wasn't intended as one. But it became one?" A faint glow spread beneath the silver markings along her neck. She looked away first. "You ask too many questions." "You've noticed." They walked together through the nearly empty corridor. For the first time, neither hurried back to duty. The silence between them no longer felt formal. It felt shared. They reached one of the ship's observation galleries. Beyond the transparent alloy, stars drifted endlessly across the darkness. Varessa rested one hand lightly against the railing. "When I first saw you," she said quietly, "I thought you were another political burden assigned to this ship. I know." "I was wrong. You adjusted quickly." She looked at him. "No. It took me longer than it should have." He leaned beside her, leaving just enough space that neither felt crowded. "We all carry assumptions. You don't seem to. I've carried plenty. What changed?" He watched the stars for a long moment. Experience usually argues better than pride. The answer settled comfortably between them. Neither tried to fill the silence. Neither needed to. Outside, the damaged Resolute continued her slow journey through the stars. Inside, something equally significant had begun to change. For the first time in many years, Commander Varessa's soul no longer felt like she carried the weight of command alone. The Resolute entered Coalition Repair Station 17 under radio silence. No welcoming formation waited beyond the docking perimeter. No ceremonial escort approached. Only maintenance drones drifted through the vast docking chamber, while a handful of weary technicians guided the scarred battleship into its berth. The station itself felt unusually quiet. Commander Varessa noticed immediately. "They're hiding something." Captain Halden looked toward the observation ports. "They usually are." Before the docking clamps had fully locked into place, an encrypted transmission arrived on the bridge. The captain read the authorization code twice. His expression hardened. "They're requesting Lieutenant Commander Arden." The bridge fell silent. Varessa frowned. "By name?" "Personally." Elias looked up from his notebook. "I wasn't expecting visitors." Captain Halden stood. "Neither was I." 30 minutes later, Elias and Varessa followed a station security escort through corridors that had clearly been sealed for years. Layers of reinforced blast doors opened one after another. No signs marked the passageways. No ordinary personnel were present. Eventually, the escort stopped before a circular vault door. A frail, elderly officer waited outside. His dark uniform carried more campaign ribbons than anyone Elias had ever seen. The old admiral dismissed the guards with a wave. "We'll speak alone." Varessa remained still. "I'm responsible for his safety." The admiral studied her for a long moment. "So, I've been told." He nodded once. "You may enter." The vault door opened. Inside rested an archive unlike anything either of them expected. Rows upon rows of physical books, paper maps, mechanical instruments, ancient recording devices preserved inside climate-controlled glass. Elias slowly turned in place. "This is a museum." The admiral shook his head. "No, it's evidence." The old officer walked toward a sealed display case. "I've waited 23 years to meet someone who could understand this room." He entered a security code. The glass lifted. Inside lay an old naval cap. Human. Its fabric had faded with age. The insignia above the brim matched the emblem stitched onto Elias's own coat. His breathing slowed. "Where did you get this?" "It belonged to Admiral Nathaniel Cross." "I've never heard the name." "You weren't supposed to." The admiral activated a projector. Stars filled the room. Then fleets. Thousands upon thousands of ships. Human ships. Varessa stared. "What fleet is this?" "The first Coalition fleet." She frowned. "The Coalition didn't exist then." The old admiral looked directly at her. "It existed because of them." The projection shifted. Historical footage appeared. Human officers standing beside dozens of alien species. Construction of orbital shipyards. Joint military academies. Diplomatic assemblies. Elias barely blinked. "What am I looking at?" "Our true history." The admiral clasped his hands behind his back. 8 centuries ago, humanity united nearly 40 civilizations against an empire that threatened every inhabited system. He pointed toward the projection. "The tactical doctrines every Coalition academy teaches." Another image appeared. A handwritten manual. "Human. Were written by your people." Varessa whispered. "That's impossible." The admiral smiled sadly. "No. It's merely inconvenient." He opened another archive. Political records scrolled across the display. Votes, treaties, amendments, classified decrees. When humanity disappeared during the collapse wars, surviving governments rewrote history. "Why?" Elias asked. "Power." The old officer answered without hesitation. No civilization wished to admit its greatest military achievements came from a species that no longer existed. So they erased us. They honored you publicly. He paused. They buried you privately. The room became painfully quiet. Varessa looked toward Elias. He hadn't spoken. His eyes remained fixed on the old human fleet displayed before him. Thousands of faces, none alive anymore. The Admiral stepped beside him. "I'm sorry," Elias finally asked. "How many people knew?" "Very few. And you?" "I served under the last officer who protected the archives." The Admiral's weathered expression softened. "When Earth fell, he gave me one order." "What order?" "If another human is ever found," he smiled faintly, "make certain they survive long enough to remind the galaxy who taught it to fight." Varessa slowly turned. "You arranged his transfer." The Admiral nodded. "Yes?" Captain Halden's name appeared on another classified file. "So did your captains." Elias looked surprised. "He knew?" "Only enough." "I couldn't place you aboard an influential flagship. Politics would have consumed you. So you sent me to the Coffin. I sent you to honest people." The answer lingered. "The Resolute doesn't care about prestige." The Admiral looked toward Varessa. "It values competence." Then toward Elias. "And I believed competence would eventually speak louder than politics." The archive doors suddenly locked. A warning tone echoed through the chamber. Station security announced, "Unauthorized network intrusion detected." The Admiral cursed quietly. "They found us." Varessa's hand moved instinctively toward her sidearm. "Dominion?" The Admiral shook his head. "Worse? Internal security. They've been trying to destroy these archives for years." Heavy footsteps echoed beyond the vault door. "Security teams. Approaching quickly." The Admiral looked toward Elias. "There isn't much time." He removed a small metallic data core from inside his uniform. The complete historical archive. Elias accepted it carefully. "It belongs to humanity. It belongs to everyone." The Admiral smiled. "Protect it." Moments later, Captain Halden's voice crackled through Elias's communicator. "Lieutenant, go ahead. We have a problem." "What kind?" "Long-range sensors just confirmed a Dominion strike fleet entering the sector." Varessa's eyes widened. "Already?" Captain Halden continued. "They're heading for the station." The Admiral exhaled slowly. "They've tracked the archive." Elias slipped the data core inside his coat. "Then we leave." The old officer shook his head. "No. They're expecting that." He activated another projection. A tactical map of the station. "They'll surround every docking exit." Elias studied the layout. His gaze settled on several maintenance tunnels running beneath the station. A faint smile appeared. Varessa noticed immediately. "You have an idea." "I have several." The Admiral laughed softly. "Good. Because history has finally caught up with you." As warning sirens spread across Repair Station 17, the crew of the Resolute rushed back to battle stations. They believed another desperate fight was about to begin. Only Elias understood the true stakes. The Dominion wasn't attacking a damaged battleship. It wasn't attacking a repair station. It was attacking the truth. And if that truth survived the coming battle, the galaxy would learn that humanity had never been the weakest civilization. It had simply been the one everyone else had forgotten. The first Dominion missiles struck Repair Station 17 before every civilian transport had cleared its docks. The impact shuddered through the station. Emergency lights flooded every corridor. Across the bridge of the Resolute, officers raced to their stations as external cameras filled with fire and drifting debris. The communications specialist looked up from her console. Dominion fleet emerging from hyperspace. "Count." 34 warships. A heavy silence settled over the bridge. Captain Halden drew a slow breath. They brought an execution fleet. Elias stepped beside the central tactical display. "They brought enough ships to make us believe we should surrender." The captain looked at him. You don't agree? No. Outside the station, Dominion cruisers spread into a tightening ring. Instead of charging directly toward the docks, they positioned themselves to deny every escape route. The Dominion commander smiled as the formation settled. Seal every vector. No ship leaves. Aboard the Resolute. Captain Halden studied the same formation. They've trapped us. Elias shook his head. They've trapped themselves. Several officers looked at him. He enlarged the station schematic. Repair Station 17 wasn't built as a fortress. His finger traced a series of maintenance corridors beneath the station. It was built as a shipyard. The chief engineer leaned forward. I know those tunnels. They connect every dry dock. Elias nodded. They also connect every reactor. Understanding slowly spread across the bridge. Varessa looked at him. You want to move the station. I want them to think it's dead. Orders spread through the Resolute. Engineering rerouted auxiliary power. Station technicians synchronized dormant thrusters that had not fired in decades. Maintenance crews sealed abandoned construction bays. Nothing about the operation resembled conventional doctrine, which made it perfect. The Dominion watched only the warships. No one paid attention to the repair station itself. Minutes later, the first stage activated. Massive maneuvering engines hidden beneath the station roared to life. Repair Station 17 rotated nearly 12 degrees. To the Dominion fleet, it appeared insignificant. Inside the battlefield, everything changed. Dominion firing solutions slipped out of alignment. Missiles struck armor that was no longer there. Coalition ships suddenly found narrow escape corridors where none had existed moments earlier. Captain Halden smiled. I've never seen anyone use an entire station as cover. Elias answered quietly. Neither have they. The Resolute accelerated through one of the newly created gaps. Enemy cruisers rushed to intercept, exactly as Elias expected. Now, he said calmly. The station completed its second rotation. Hidden docking arms released dozens of unfinished hull sections that had been waiting for final assembly. Thousands of tons of armored plating drifted directly into the Dominion advance. Collision alarms erupted across enemy formations. Cruisers scattered to avoid impacts. The perfect firing line vanished. Coalition vessels opened fire. Blue energy lances crossed the darkness. One Dominion cruiser exploded, then another. The battlefield dissolved into confusion. The Dominion commander slammed a fist against his console. Who is directing them? His tactical officer answered. The human. The commander stared at the display. Again. For the third time, one damaged coalition battleship had dismantled a superior fleet through preparation instead of brute force. He whispered to himself, "Find him." Victory came with a cost. A concentrated barrage struck the Resolute. Amidships. The bridge lurched violently. Emergency bulkheads slammed into place. Captain Halden collapsed against his command chair. Varessa reached him first. Captain! Blood stained the front of his uniform. The medical officer rushed forward. After only seconds, the physician lowered his eyes. The bridge grew painfully quiet. Captain Halden looked toward Elias. His voice had become little more than a whisper. You already know. He struggled for another breath. What this crew needs. Elias stepped closer. I'm not your captain. You've been, the old man smiled faintly. Ours, since the first battle. He turned toward the assembled officers. No objections. One by one, every senior officer stood. The chief engineer, the marine commander, the intelligence officer, the communications specialist, even the exhausted bridge crew. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Varessa faced Elias. Her voice remained steady despite the grief in her eyes. By authority vested in me as executive officer. She paused only briefly. I recognize Lieutenant Commander Elias Arden as commanding officer of the Coalition warship. Resolute? The bridge answered together. Acknowledged. Elias looked around the command deck. Not one face questioned the decision. These people had become more than a crew. They had become family. He rested one hand on the captain's chair, then sat. No triumph touched his expression. Only responsibility. Helm. Sir, bring us between the station and the civilian transports. Yes, Captain. It was the first time anyone had called him that. The Resolute surged forward. Dominion ships concentrated every available weapon on the aging battleship. Shield strength fell. 70%. 53. 31. Elias never raised his voice. Starboard batteries. Fire! Navigation. 3 degrees port. Engineering. Give me everything you've got. The chief engineer laughed over the intercom. I was waiting for you to ask. Power flooded into the engines. The Resolute slipped between converging cruisers with only meters to spare. Its broadside cannons unleashed a devastating volley. The lead Dominion carrier split apart. Flames blossomed across its spine before the enormous vessel drifted silently into darkness. The remaining Dominion formation hesitated. Only for a heartbeat. It was enough. Coalition reinforcements emerged from hyperspace. Dozens of ships. Then hundreds. The emergency broadcast carrying the station's coordinates had finally reached nearby fleets. Seeing the Dominion trapped between fresh coalition forces and the Resolute, the enemy commander gave the only order left. Retreat. One by one, the surviving Dominion ships vanished into hyperspace. The battle was over. Several hours later, silence returned to the bridge. Repair crews worked methodically. The dead were honored. The living carried on. Elias stood alone in the observation gallery overlooking the stars. He removed the small historical data core from his pocket. Veressa approached quietly. They're already transmitting the archive. He nodded. The truth won't stay buried anymore. She stopped beside him. You changed more than this battle. We all did. She smiled softly. You still refuse to take all the credit. There wasn't only one person fighting. For a moment neither spoke. Then she reached for his hand. This time there was no hesitation. Their fingers intertwined naturally. You once told me that good people believe others can become better. I remember. You were right. He looked at her. No. She stepped closer until only a breath separated them. We were. Her hand rose to the side of his face, gently tracing the small scar above his eyebrow. I almost lost you. I'm still here. I know. Her lips met his in a slow, lingering kiss that carried everything they had left unsaid through battles, sleepless nights, shared burdens, and quiet moments between the alarms. When they finally drew apart, the stars reflected in her violet eyes. The galaxy thought humanity ended with one survivor, she whispered. Elias smiled. Humanity was never just a species. What was it? A choice. Outside the viewport, the scarred Resolute drifted proudly among the gathering coalition fleet. The ship once known as the Coffin had become a symbol of hope, and the last human they had sent to die had become the captain every civilization chose to follow.